Welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who always picks the correct starting 11. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. For which team is the question?
For the US men's national team. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're not picking the Canada starting 11, right? That's not what you're all about.
I don't know. You don't know what I'm all about. I could be all about that, Daryl.
Oh, I wish I hadn't started with that joke.
I have no other Canadian accents. That's right. You hoser. There we go. There's two.
All I have is the jokes from the South Park movie. Yeah.
All right, buddy.
I'm not your buddy, pal. All right. We are here to talk
Planned.
The US's second CONCACAF Nations League game.
Yes.
It's away to Canada. Mm-hmm. It's that big away trip that Greg Berhalter was so worried about. The culture is going to be so different.
How are Michael Bradley and company going to be welcomed into the stadium they play in most of the time?
Yeah. I will say this, though. After the impressive handling of Cuba, I'm looking forward to this game because I think it's going to be something of a test for the US men's national team.
Yes, I think so.
Canada's not Mexico. Mm-mm. Canada's not Argentina. But Canada is much improved.
Out of context, Total Soccer Show. Canada's not Mexico.
No, but you know what I'm saying?
I know what you mean.
Like
I know.
An opponent where we're thinking, they might be better than us. I think of it more as this is an opponent that has some threats, has some weapons, and we still should expect to beat them. And to me, that's a really good challenge.
I agree. I think anytime you beat a team that is significantly inferior, there's always an element of, but that next team could be more exciting because the other team was so poor. So I think there is a small percentage of that in some of my thoughts on Canada is but I know they're going to be better than Cuba, so that already makes them more deadly. Yeah. But I also think
they look way better just because of the comparison.
Yes. Yeah. But then I also think they look way better because they are way better, especially from Canadian teams we've played in the past. Yeah. And I think the United States
didn't have Bayern Munich players on them in the past.
They certainly did not. And then I think the United States being relatively weak combined with some of the injuries they're dealing with, I think this is a much more competitive game than we've seen in the past. I don't think that's necessarily a condemnation of U.S. soccer or the U.S. men's national team. I think it's a sign that Canadian soccer is getting better. Yep. It's not a thing I love, but it is the case.
And we're still in a sort of rebuilding phase, right? We're in a Berhalter building phase.
Yep.
I want Canada to be good.
A BB4, if you will.
A BB4, yeah. Mm-hmm. I want Canada to be good. Yeah. I love the rivalry with Mexico because it gives us games to look forward to in CONCACAF. If Canada suddenly became a dangerous team, it would give us a nice rivalry to the north, right? Don't get me wrong, I want the US to win this game, but I would like a version of this where the US wins this game and we see signs that, this Canada team could be a rival for the next decade or so.
I still think you will never... I'm not sure this is what you're saying, but the reason why I have a harder time getting excited about that is just because we don't have the history of geopolitically ruining Canada the way we do with many other Central and South American states. Yeah. So that is always going to heighten that rivalry between the United States and Mexico. Yeah. That's it. War of 1812. There's still some bad blood. Point Roberts, whatever it is. Yeah, that's always signs.
I understand. Maybe there's not the same. It's not going to be the same level of rivalry, but I'd like some level of rivalry other than we played them in January camp and it's 0-0.
That's fair.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. And I think they've given you good reason to maybe think about a rivalry in the future because, as you said, they've got players playing for Bayern Munich as well as other big clubs. So maybe we should spend a moment to discuss Canada, if that works for you?
I think especially when we get into picking our US 11 and how we would like the US to approach this game, Canada have enough threats that it's worth taking those into account. All right. I think the player that I would start with is weirdly not Alphonso Davies.
How dare you?
It's Jonathan David.
Okay.
And I think it's important to highlight him because I think a lot of our listeners might not know about him. But if he was American, we'd be all about him. There'd be a lot of coverage about 19-year-old striker Jonathan David, who is playing for Genk in Belgium and doing quite well.
I think it's Ghent. It's the ever-confusing Genk versus Ghent.
Right.
Yes.
He played for Ghent in Belgium, as I definitely said.
Well, it's not that I knew that off the top of my head. I've got the Wikipedia page in front of me, which also tells me that in 10 appearances for Canada, he has 11 goals. Yes, I think you are correct, that if you were playing for the United States with that scoring rate, we'd be slightly more angry if Gyasi Zardes started over him.
Can I make you a little upset? He was born in New York.
Yeah. Of course.
We maybe could have got at him.
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be a few of those. And in this case, maybe we're going to rue that day a little bit more than we have in the past.
So I've had a good look at Jonathan David playing for that team that begins with G and also for Canada. He's got a lot going for him. He has the element of surprise going for him. He does a lot. I've seen a lot of him doing this thing, the trick we love where you shape as if you're receiving the ball, but at the last minute you turn and carry it.
Yeah.
He does that a lot, and people seem to fall for it an awful lot. He also just seems to have the element of surprise. Like a lot of the times, there's like a back heel that you don't see coming.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan David is, I think of him as sharp, like quick decisions that trick people.
All right.
Yeah.
Where do you expect him, or where would your best guess be as to where we see him for Canada against the United States?
I don't know. So he's either going to play centre forward, or if he doesn't play centre forward, he'll still start, and I think he'll end up on the wing. Lucas Cavallini will play centre forward if Jonathan David doesn't. I've almost got a list of reasons to be worried about him. So he's got some physicality. He's only 5'11", but he's kind of built. He's strong. He will win physical tussles. He's also pretty quick if he runs in behind. I mean, those are things that neither of the Cuban attackers offered, right? When the ball went forward, we weren't worried about their pacing behind. We weren't worried about how they sort of held the ball up and we couldn't get it off them. So he's got all those things going for him.
This is maybe a difficult question, but like I'll do my best to ask it. Hopefully you understand what I'm trying to get at. Like a lot of times we can sort of guess what our opponent or a team is going to do by where they play a player. So if you've got this very creative, tricky, like the one that stands out in my mind is like Kim Little playing for Scotland. That like if you play her further forward, you're expecting to get more shooting opportunities, more attacking opportunities, so you want your best goal scorer in a position to score goals. But if you know you're playing against a stronger opponent, then she became a number 10 / a number 8 because you want her on the ball more. So I guess, can we do that here with Jonathan David, do you think? Like, can we say, if he's a right winger, they're going to be sitting deeper a little bit more and trying to counterattack through him?
I think so. No, I think if he's on the wing and it's Lucas Cavallini, who plays for Puebla in Mexico, if it's him up front, I think that means they're a little less confident about being the dominant team, because Cavallini is more of a target forward who they will be serving balls up to and hoping that he connects play.
Okay, that makes
Whereas
sense.
if you play Jonathan David, for example, they played Jonathan David at forward when they played Cuba because they knew they'd be all over them, they'd have the ball. And actually, the more I'm saying this, I think I'm talking myself into it. It may end up being Cavallini.
Okay.
But I also think that Canada are so focused on this game that it's probably difficult to guess what they're going to do, because there's a good chance that coach, is it Birdman, the head coach? Jonathan Herdman, excuse me. Birdman's Michael Keaton. That John Herdman may
one of the rappers from New Orleans, I think, right?
He may have some wacky plan that he's been working on for months.
That didn't do it for you? You were in on that one?
I wasn't familiar.
That's fair.
Not familiar.
That's fair. Okay. So we've got Jonathan David on one side potentially, or maybe potentially up top. If it is David up top, then maybe we see Junior Hoylett, who we've talked about at points on this show previously. It may be Junior Hoylett starts on the right, but the man you mentioned previously, we would fully expect to start at left wing, has played left back for Canada. I'm guessing we see him at left wing, is Alphonso Davies.
So Alphonso Davies, I think that's the question. Does he start on the left wing or does he start left back? Because if I'm Jonathan Herdman, I might have watched that Cuba game and seen the form that Jordan Morris is in and think, pacey threat down the right, what do I counter that with? Alphonso Davies might be a good answer at left back, especially if you've got enough wingers and attackers that you can play there.
The only other time I've seen him, like that I recall seeing him play like left back, left wing back, left center back was in the All-Star game, I think, against Juventus that year.
Yeah.
And I think that was more so an opportunity to just get him on the field. The times that I think he has been a left back for Canada was maybe when they expected to be a bit more attacking and they wanted to get as many attacking options on the field as they could. I don't know how much. I don't know enough to know about his defensive abilities, but that would be my one question. Is like, I don't know if just putting in a pacier, faster player negates what Jordan Morris is offering or whomever is playing out there.
That's true.
So maybe that's where you want to go with a more dedicated defensive option and let Alphonso Davies have a bit more attacking freedom.
All right, so if Alphonso Davies is played as the attacking left winger, there is plenty for us to be worried about.
Yeah.
This young man has got moves, and then he's got the acceleration to leave you in his dust after he's put a move on you. He is also, despite being a teenager, he's not one of those like skinny, weak teenagers, right? He's a teenager that can happily knock you over.
He's large.
He's
big.
He's a large man who is somehow also very fast and very graceful.
Yes.
I'm slightly terrified for the US defense against Alphonso Davies.
Because I don't mean large in the sense of like he's not like 6'5" and going to be destructive. It's just he has all the skill sets you've mentioned. So even any semblance of size is another factor to have to consider.
Yeah.
And yes, has the sturdiness, has played at professional level at a high level with Bayern Munich. Not necessarily like a first team regular for Bayern Munich,
but he has played in the first team.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely the most technical player I think the United States is going to be having to deal with, and maybe also the one that's like the biggest X factor, because if you're catching him on a night when he's electric and up for it and wants to humble the United States, we could have problems.
Okay, so if I was Canada, if I was John Herdman, I think I would go with a pressing system against the United States.
Yeah.
Because I would have seen the trouble we had playing out of the press against Mexico in the past. I'm not sure that problem's ever been solved. The US hasn't proven they can play out of a high press. I think Jonathan David, I didn't mention this when I first talked about him. I saw in the highlights that I saw a lot of hassling, a lot of him winning balls back off defenders. Alphonso Davies, I think, is going to be tough to get past. I think you could have a hard-working front band of attackers willing to press the United States. I think that could cause trouble for the US rather than Canada sitting back and trying to break on us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that's like...
It's a risk, right, from Herdman, but I think if I was him, that's the risk I'd be taking.
I think it's a risk worth taking. Yes, exactly. Because go back to the Uruguay game. I think a huge reason why the United States looked so much better than they did against Mexico was because Uruguay sat off. They gave the United States time. Cuba sort of tried to press, but it was a very familiar press. We talked about this in the preview to what the United States occasionally try to do, where it's like, two of them are running at a defender, or two of them are running at a player with the ball, but then the other two are sitting off, and it's not quite the collective press that really causes problems. And I think if Canada are able to do that, I agree with you. I think it puts the United States off of their confident footing much faster than just being frustrated because they can't find a way through a packed opponent. I'd
also say this for Canada. If you look at the roster, it's really talented and exciting up front, right? There are 4 players that we mentioned for probably 3 positions, right? Their midfield is pretty good. There's a couple of players I'd like to talk about. Like we'll get to the central midfield in a minute. The weakest part of their roster, I mean, even if you just look at which clubs these players play for, is the defense, right? It's definitely the weakest part of the roster. So it's not. I then wouldn't want to rely on my defense to keep me in the game. I would go with my more talented attackers and midfielders and force the issue with a press. I'm not saying that's what Herdman would do. I'm just giving him advice the day before the game.
I mean, to back you up though, I did a quick idea of what I thought Canada's starting 11 might be.
Yeah.
And the only areas where I have either a complete lack of depth or 2 question marks is the 4-man back line.
Yeah.
A big part of that is because Daniel Henry, I believe, is suspended for this game. I think picked up 2 yellows against Cuba in their last Nations League game.
I didn't know that.
So I believe he is suspended. I do not know the rules for sure, so maybe there's an asterisk there. But if he is out...
got a yellow in one and a yellow in the other.
He got 2 yellows in that last game against Cuba, the 1-0 away win that Canada had.
Isn't that a red?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So I think he's suspended for this game. That's what I'm saying, for yellow card accumulation. And so...
you'd be suspended for being sent off, right?
I mean, a second yellow, you get suspended for the second yellow. It's not a straight red, which is a different thing. It's a weird thing. Yeah, for second bookable offense or whatever is what you're sent off for. It's semantics. The point is that once you move Henry from that one, I think you see Derek Cornelius start, who's 21 years old for the Vancouver Whitecaps. Again, to your point, I don't
know much about him.
Exactly. It's not suddenly quite so many proven names. Left back, there have been a few different names tried there. So I think I'm with you that you don't necessarily want to go with this is an unproven back line that's maybe missing one of our veteran players, but let's sit deep and try to see what happens. I think it makes much more sense to go out and try to press and make the United States uncomfortable.
All right. Can we talk about that midfield then? Because I think there are a couple of names that US fans should be aware of. The first one is a player that, I'll be honest, I did not know existed until I started doing some research for this. It's the captain.
Yeah.
It's Scott Arfield.
Yep.
So Scott Arfield is essentially Scottish with Canadian heritage. He did the one-time switch a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. He plays for Rangers. I watched some footage. Scott Arfield is a player that Greg Berhalter would love to have in his team. This is a controlling midfielder. This is a guy with extremely precise passing. Lots of beautiful diagonals, lots of clever little passes, lots of really perfectly weighted through balls is what I saw from Scott Arfield, both for Canada and for Rangers. I think his passing is something the US should be worried about.
All right. So we think it'll be Arfield. It tends to be a 3-man midfield. It could be a 4-2-3-1. It could be 4-3-3, however you want to look at it, whatever. I agree with you that Arfield, I think, will start and be difficult for the United States, and I think his partner, Mark Anthony Kaye, certainly does not help with making that midfield easier to break down.
No, so Mark Anthony Kaye you'll know from LAFC. What would you say his qualities are? I can't say I've paid enough attention to his game, but I think of him as just a good all-round player who does a bit of everything.
I would say that, and I think, again, I'm not an LAFC fan. I can't say that I've watched every single game of his. From what I have seen, I appreciate his calmness on the ball that isn't slowness on the ball, but it's just he seems very calm in his post-match interviews I've seen. He's very sort of how do I say this? Academic, but not like nerdy. He's not pushing up his glasses. It's just more of he gives succinct, thoughtful, but to the point answers.
Yeah.
I heard him him talk about. I think he got a little emotional. I can't remember if that was him or not. But like, I think I've seen him in a few different scenarios able to explain what was being asked of him or what the problems were or how they were able to adjust.
All right, so he's good in the post-match press conference.
No, but it's more so that's representative of what he is on the field, that I think he's a calm presence who figures stuff out.
I also know I've seen him played fullback for Canada a few times. Maybe if they are a bit worried about sort of lack of experience or lack of quality in the back, it's possible Mark-Anthony Kaye ends up playing fullback and maybe trying to defend one of our wingers.
It's possible.
It's possible. The other guy that we know from MLS...
I think you love multiple position speculation. That seems to be your bread and butter lately.
Well, honestly, I like to
give
our listeners a heads up that you might see this. You know what I'm saying? I think we'll see Jonathan Osorio. Jonathan Osorio, we know from Toronto FC. Really nice creative player, right? So I think a bit of the midfield creation from Canada could come through Jonathan Osorio.
I would double down on that one because David Wotherspoon has been the other option in that 4-2-3-1 as the kind of number 10, the central midfielder. He is not in this squad, which to me opens up the door for, it to be Jonathan Osorio as that number 10 starting against the U.S.
Samuel Piette is a guy I'm not as familiar with, but he has 44 caps and is very highly rated by a lot of people. I didn't know he had an adventure in Europe, but came back and played in Major League Soccer. That's another name that you might see starting in midfield.
He's also the other name that confuses me consistently because I can never remember if it's like Admiral Piette or if it's PT or if it's one of those different pronunciation PT, things. I think it's PT. Yeah. Who knows? We'll find out.
PT didn't even have a head. One name missing, Kyle Larin, was not selected.
Was that a Dumb and Dumber reference? Took me a minute to remember what that came from. There we go.
Kyle Larin not on this roster.
Not on this roster.
Honestly, given the wealth of attacking talent we just listed, maybe not such a big deal.
You're just wearing like a very nice wool sweater. You look all academic, your glasses, your hair parted, and then a Dumb and Dumber reference out of nowhere. Out of nowhere.
It's a pullover, but thanks for noticing.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry.
So one thing you mentioned, Canada playing like maybe a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. The one weird wrinkle is I went back and looked at the Gold Cup, and when they played teams that they thought were more competitive, they switched it up. So against Mexico in the group stage, they played 5-4-1. Against Haiti in the quarterfinal, they played 4-5-1 or like a 4-4-1-1 and lost.
Right.
So I don't know.
With Alphonso Davies at left back.
Right. Yeah. So it's quite tough to predict. Maybe they look back on that and say maybe being a bit more cowardly is not the way to go because we ended up losing to Haiti like that.
Honestly, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. I'm not saying this is what they will do, but your explanation of questionable defense, much stronger midfield and attack. The United States has looked vulnerable to pressing and to teams kind of going at them and making them uncomfortable. Yeah. That seems to me the game plan that Canada should go for. Yeah. They may not, but it's the one that makes sense.
Right? That's
no,
just
not at
saying,
all.
if I was playing the US, here's what I'd do.
Oh, no, well, yeah, but I think we never claim that like we have maximum authority or knowledge of any opponent the United States is playing, especially in a friendly like this. But I think what we try to do is sort of look at their strengths, look at their weaknesses, and look at what is the most common sense way to deploy those to get a result. Yeah. And I think you're totally right that sitting off, being defensive, changing up the shape has not worked for Canada to the greatest degree, especially in the Gold Cup and that loss to Haiti you mentioned. Yep. So like just being a bit more aggressive, stepping out a bit more, especially against the U.S. team that we think there will be some changes with as well. That makes a lot more sense, and I think it's a good call by you.
All right, so to very quickly summarize before we move on, I'm going to say there's going to be an ad read, and then we start picking our U.S.
I
11.
believe you are correct. That sounds like a plan.
Look out for Jonathan David up front, because he's got a little bit of everything, and he brings the element of surprise.
Check.
Look out for Alphonso Davies' dribbling and acceleration, because that's going to be dangerous.
Check.
Look out for Junior Hoylett's shot from distance. I know as a Wolves fan that can happen to you.
And I would assume that even if he doesn't start, yes, it can. And I would assume even if he doesn't start, Junior Hoylett is a player we will see at some point in this game.
Yes, one way or another. Yeah, he'll pop up on the wing. Look out for Scott Arfield's very precise and scary passing. It's a thing I didn't know about before today, or this morning, but now I'm a little worried about. And a little bit of creativity from Jonathan Osorio is another thing to be worried about.
Yeah. And also a lot of familiarity between Osorio and Michael Bradley and vice versa.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting clash, right?
It certainly will. Since Michael Bradley we're expecting to be the kind of number 6, we would assume would be matched up at least a little bit against Jonathan Osorio if he is that number 10.
All right, well, if you feel like you need calming down,
I see where you're going with this one. What could you do, Daryl Grove? Could you get kicked out of the ad copy? Because that's what's happened over here.
I found mine.
I've got mine.
Today's show is sponsored by Feels. Feels is a way to feel better. Their premium CBD will keep your head clear and help you feel your best. CBD has been proven to greatly reduce anxiety, pain, and sleeplessness. And let me tell you, this worked for my wife.
Talk it out.
She recently had an attack. I'm going to call it an attack of, what's it called? Sciatica. The sciatic nerve, when stuff gets inflamed around the sciatic nerve and just presses on it.
The thing that Pauly Shore introduced me to as a child. Yep.
There is this is the first time that either of us experienced this. Like, I did it vicariously through her. She was in constant pain for about 24 hours because there was no like good stretch or position that she could get in that would give her any relief. So she was in a bad way. The only way she got some sleep was to have a few drops of Feels CBD. She said that was the only time she managed to essentially stop thinking about it because she was constantly like, it hurts. She said it just calmed her down because anxiety is a part of it, right? When you're in pain, it's like it all builds on each other. She said it calmed her down and she was able to just get some sleep after Feels.
All right, so we know the U.S. soccer has at least somewhat of a surplus. I'm going to say this. You get all the angsty, upset U.S. fans in one giant location. Then you like turn on the sprinkler system, but it's filled with Feels CBD. And then it sprays out over everybody. The entire U.S. fan base needs anxiety, pain, and sleeplessness reduced. And I think if you apply that everywhere, then maybe people feel a little bit better about the national team. Maybe we're a little bit more relaxed. Even if things don't go the way we want them to, the results don't go that well, we still don't have the anxiety, pain, and sleeplessness. And I think that's a positive for sure.
So they're having it rain down on you in the stadium sounds nice.
Blade style.
Blade style, that'd be good too. But what Feels actually do, they ship it direct to your doorstep in only a few days.
That makes more sense. That's probably an easier deployment system.
It's more traditional, right? It's more traditional.
Yes.
And Feels is the natural, healthy, better way to feel better.
That's right. And if you don't want to bathe in it, which is not necessarily recommended, you place a few drops of Feels under your tongue. You feel the difference within minutes, but it's worth noting there is no high, there's no hangover, there's no threat of addiction or anything like that. So you can just enjoy it, calm down, and feel better about U.S. soccer or anything else, including sciatica.
And if you are like confused about CBD and about Feels, they have human support on the CBD hotline, also text message support to help you guide you through the experience of using Feels. You could also ask them on the hotline what their starting 11 for the US would be, and if they can calm you down about that. You never know. You might get someone who knows all about US soccer.
It's a double whammy. So our listeners can become a member today by going to feels.com/TSS, and they will get 50% off the first order with free shipping. That's FEALS.com/TSS to become a member and get 50% automatically taken off your first order with free shipping.
That URL one more time is FEALS, feels.com/TSS.
That all checks out. Thank you very much to Feels for sponsoring today's episode and for making Shannon and I guess vicariously Daryl feel better about things.
It was an incredible moment.
All right. Now, U.S. fans felt maybe slightly better. It was not quite an incredible moment, beating Cuba 7-0.
It was an incredible first 15 minutes.
But it did make us all feel a little bit better, I think.
Yeah.
So, well, not all of us. Most of us. Some people were still like, yeah, who cares?
Really?
And to those people I say, well, let's worry about Canada then. Because, as we've said, it will be a stronger opponent, certainly than it was against Cuba, but a stronger Canada than I think the United States has played in a good long while, if not ever. So, Daryl, how then do you think the U.S. should approach this game? Do you think it will be, like, should we see any deviation or experimentation here, or do you want to see more of what we saw against Cuba? Not necessarily the goals, but the way the U.S. played. Do you just want to see them continuing along that line?
I mean, yes, in terms of the positional play, the possession, the patterns of play that I think we were all allowed to see how it's supposed to work against Cuba. I mentioned this on the review show, right? You could see the patterns of play because Cuba let us do it. I mean, I want to see the players full of confidence about the system working and running those patterns, and then it's so developed at this point that it works against a better opponent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think whether we like it or not, that is definitely going to be the plan, right? Greg Berhalter's not going to have suddenly a whole different plan and a different style of play to go up against Canada, right? So,
I would assume not.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to see it look at least a little bit like it looked against Cuba, knowing that it can't look exactly the same because the opponent's much better. Is that fair?
This is true. This is very, very fair. Yeah, we have had, and then in terms of how the team will actually look, we've had a few little snippets from the press conference that he held today. Do
you want me to share quickly?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
What I know. So these are just tweets from a tweet from Nico Cantor that I saw. There was a report from the press conference. So Zach Steffen will start. Berhalter confirmed that. There was some injury concern about him last week, right? But it seems like Zach Steffen is fit enough and is absolutely the US number one at this point, right? Zach Steffen will start. Josh Sargent, they're monitoring his ankle. Do you remember there was an injury during the first half and he was kind of stretching it out towards the end of the first half? So they're monitoring his ankle. They're not sure in what sort of shape he's in. And I think the Berhalter quote was they'll be happy, I think, quote, happy with either Sargent or Zardes at striker. So the mystery will continue until Tuesday night.
It certainly will.
Yeah. By the way, this game is Tuesday night. Approximately a 7:30 Eastern kickoff on ESPN2 and Univision Deportes.
If I were a betting man...
TUDN, as they call it now.
TUDN, of course. If I were a betting man, which I'm not really, but I think if I had to bet, my guess is that it's going to be Gyasi Zardes starting this game. I think because...
Why would you push all your chips to Gyasi Zardes?
Oh, I've already pushed all my chips in on the Cuba game, and that I feel comfortable with that.
Shouldn't you be wealthy now?
I'm never... You never bluff immediately, or not never, but it's rare to see the bluff immediately after the all-in when you've just hit your hand. So I feel like I'm not going to push in and risk that one again. But I will say, I think because we have seen Berhalter rotate between friendlies, this is not a friendly, but it's still a like two competitive games in a tight time period. So I think we'll see some experimentation, some rotation, and then I think that combined, I think we may have seen Zardes to begin with, just because Sargent played most of that game. Did he play the whole game? Yeah, played the whole game against Cuba. So I think we always would have seen rotation. Maybe Sargent starts and maybe Zardes played a half, but I think because of the injury, it's far more likely, in my opinion, that we see Gyasi Zardes start.
I mean, it was going to be Jose Altidore. Right?
This is true.
So whatever's going on, Greg Berhalter's using his second choice. We just don't know if his second choice is Sargent or Zardes. Here's what I really hope. I hope that the Sargent ankle injury isn't an issue in the selection process, if only because I want the information of who does Berhalter go with.
Who's his number two?
But if he's got the excuse of, Josh's ankle wasn't quite up to it, then I'm picking Gyasi, then we don't know the answer to the question, right? It's like Gyasi by default.
I mean, that's
the two sweetest words in the English language.
Gyasi by default?
Default.
Okay. Default is your too sweet. I was confused. That said, if it is Josh Sargent, do we have the answer then? Is Josh Sargent the number two?
Yeah, because there's points on the line. It's a tough opponent. And then the guy that was trusted to go out and play against Canada, that's the number two striker, right? Behind Josie. Yeah.
All right. So then maybe we should do what we usually do and try to kind of build out our starting 11. Does that work for you, or is there anything else you wanted to do first?
It absolutely does. Oh, it's probably just worth adding that in that press conference, Berhalter mentioned that Tyler Adams at some point will play the number 6 for the United States. We kind of could have guessed that anyway, right? I think everyone had just got a little bit anxious about we're never going to play him at the number 6.
I'm definitely
People need to calm down.
Well, here's the thing. I'm definitely still, even though we've all decided we're talked out about it, we don't want to hear anything more about Serginho Dest, I'm still... one eye towards the Netherlands, just seeing what's happening. Yeah. And there is and now I'm overanalyzing everything. And there's an element of if Tyler Adams is going to play as the number 6, then maybe that's there's already too many right back options. And maybe Greg Berhalter was like, all right, well, Serginho Dest is going to come in and be a right back. So Tyler Adams, you can be a number 6 now. That's where I'm choosing to see this.
I think that's a very optimistic way
you're 100% it is. Yeah. Yes, of course.
I think essentially what's happened is, remember there was the interview on TUDN.
Why are you ruining this for
me? We had to kind of clarify it for people, right? Where he had talked about the potential successors to Michael Bradley, and it was like, Yule can do this, Trapp can do this. I still haven't had a good look at Tyler Adams at the number 6. So I'm going to guess there was a follow-up question in the press conference about, can you ever see Adams playing at the number 6?
Yeah.
So it's just Berhalter having to clarify for a miscommunication, essentially.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm still choosing to believe at least 1% that it's Serginho Dest letting people know.
He won't be playing today.
He will not. Instead, who do we think will be playing at right back? Reggie Cannon looked fine, looked good against Cuba. I talked to him afterwards. He said he was up for the challenge of whomever else might be there. It seems like for this squad, the most likely candidate to replace him would be DeAndre Edlin.
Yep, there's also Nick Lima on the roster, who we can tell maybe from the Cuba game that Berhalter just does not see him ever playing left back.
Yes,
so it's Cannon, Yedlin, Lima. And I wonder now if Lima was called up because Yedlin's only just back from injury, and it might be the type of injury that reoccurs. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Lima's like an insurance policy.
Yeah.
A little bit. For me, I would start Reggie Cannon, if only because he's looks so good against Cuba, had that connection with Jordan Morris, all those one-time passes to find Morris down the wing. I also just think there is something to be said for his recent performances through the Gold Cup and in the Cuba game, he's earned that spot. And it almost feels unfair for DeAndre Yedlin to come back, play, a game plus 16 minutes for Newcastle, and just walk straight back into the US men's national team.
All right. I want to pause that for one moment to ask you this. Is it close to the vest or close to the chest where you play your cards? Because whichever one they say in The Dark Knight is... The Dark Knight is wrong.
Isn't it either?
I think I'm playing this close to the chest.
How about it's close to the vest if you're wearing a vest? If you're not wearing a vest, it's close to the chest.
I think that's what confuses me right there. Okay. Berhalter does seem to like to play his cards close to the vest chest in that he...
For Gareth Southgate, it's close to the vest.
Of course it is. But I think he doesn't want to give too much away, and with that in mind, we don't really know how he sees these two games, aside from competitive games, Canada's going to be hostile, away fixture, whatever. We don't know if he is treating it as, I'm going to play my B team against Canada and the A team, such as it is B team against Cuba, A team against Canada. And so that is another thing that I don't have an answer to, but I will be paying a lot of attention to, is that starting 11, because if it's DeAndre Yedlin, then I want to see is that because Yedlin is the starting right back right now, or is it that he wants to just see what Yedlin is capable of? I still won't know for sure, but I think if it's Cannon starting at right back, similar to if it's Sargent starting up top, then we kind of know right now, right back is Reggie Cannon's to lose.
Yeah, but I think you've also got to factor in the Yedlin injury recency to it, right? The situation is different every time, and you can't have a definitive ranking of Cannon over Yedlin, because it might be that we get to November, Yedlin's played another 5 games in the Premier League and comes into camp looking hot. You know what I'm saying? I feel like Berhalter is more of a in-the-moment kind of guy.
DeAndre Yedlin cares about style. He's always looking hot. And I think also what we learned from Berhalter's comments before and after the Cuba game is I don't think he sees things in terms of a depth chart. I don't think it's, this is my starting right back, and then this is my number 2, and this is my number 3. I think it's more of this is the right back for when we want to do this is the right back for when we want to do that.
Yep.
And so maybe that's a thing we will learn more about from this Canada game. I have a feeling we end up seeing DeAndre Yedlin starting at right back.
Really?
Yeah, because of a little bit of rotation, because if you're calling him in, it could just be because he wants to see where he's at in relation to
and just get him involved in more
injury.
Camps.
Exactly, yeah. But I also think we're going to see a bit more rotation than we, from the Cuba starting lineup to this one. I think that will be Michael Bradley. That's an obvious one, but I think also DeAndre Yedlin starts at right back.
Okay, but the TSS choice would be Cannon? Because the Darryl choice is Cannon. I don't know where you are exactly.
What do you mean when you say choice?
If you were picking the team.
If I were picking the team, it's probably Reggie Cannon.
Okay.
I think until he can't do it, I want to see him continue to develop. And I think also Jordan Morris has earned the start again.
Yeah.
And I like that combination, as you said.
Yes, same. All right, centre-backs. I'm going to put my cards away from my vest/chest on the table.
Vest chest.
I would go Matt Miazga and Aaron Long
at
centre-back, because there's enough pacey threats in terms of Alphonso Davies, if he ends up coming through the middle. Jonathan David, I'm a little worried about his burst of acceleration. I think between Miazga and Ream, there's not quite enough pace. So I would be getting Aaron Long in at left centre-back to make sure there's someone with a bit of a burst of pace to keep up with Canada's attackers.
I was all set to say that I want it to be Miazga and Ream again because I want to see that partnership develop further.
Yeah.
You're right. It should be Aaron Long.
You?
Yes, you have. Aaron Long, who, by the way, is sneaky tall. I did not realize how tall that man is. He's a big fella. So he's fast and big, and I think you put him alongside Miazga. I don't know if this is where you were going, but I also think that we saw Daniel Lovitz, who we expect to be more of a stay-at-home left back, maybe venture a little bit more, but tends to be a bit more defensive, stays a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
I think we probably then see Tim Ream play that spot against Canada.
Yep.
And that suddenly makes a lot more sense.
Tim Ream at left back. Yeah, that's what I've got too, because he definitely doesn't deserve to be dropped, and I think he just brings a lot to the table, essentially. Yeah, so Tim Ream at left back, Miazga and Long at centre back. Also, the air, you were really impressed with Matt Miazga in the air.
Yes, I was.
Against Cuba. There'll be more of a challenge. If it is Cavallini starting, I think Cavallini Cavallini, excuse me, is more of an aerial threat than Cuba offered, so you at least see Matt Miazga challenged a bit more in the air.
Okay,
yeah.
All right.
He won't be able to stand and not jump and still win headers.
I mean, the man's got skills. The man is tall. That's what I can say about that one. Let's do one of the midfielders.
Well, before we move to midfield, I think we should do today's second sponsor. Today's show is also sponsored by SeatGeek, our long-running friends at SeatGeek.
Mm-hmm. With millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee, SeatGeek proves there is a better, if not best way to buy tickets. You can search for sports, live music, comedy, and more. They have the tickets you're looking for all in one place, and they are guaranteed, which means you can buy them and rest assured that you will actually have a ticket, you will actually have a seat. You will not be showing up to find out that you bought bootleg tickets that do not exist.
They also make the whole thing nice and easy, right? You go through the SeatGeek app, they have scanned the whole internet and found the best ticket deals for you, so you don't have to go to multiple sites.
Maybe not the entirety of the internet, because I would not want to wish that upon them. But they've scanned.
Oh, there's no tickets from the deep web.
There we
dark
go.
Web.
Yes, let's hope not. But what they do, and if they did,
my dark web experience exposed by me accidentally calling it the deep web.
Hey, it is what it is. But if they did have to go into the dark web, deep web, they would still be able to break it down easily with the color-coded system. Green dots on the ticket means it's a good deal if you're looking at buying it. Red dots mean the tickets or the seats are overpriced.
Yep. Also, you can go on other people's reviews. There are 50,000 5-star reviews of the Total Soccer Show. Oh, no, sorry. Of the SeatGeek app. 50,000 5-star reviews of the SeatGeek app. So there are plenty of satisfied customers out there.
That is correct. And I'm going to assume that there are still tickets available to Canada v. USA. And I'm going to go ahead and say that you can use SeatGeek to get those tickets, as you could for, say, the U.S. women's national team or any of the other various national teams participating in the United States
and you get
and surrounding countries.
SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. So you can save $10 on a ticket to any of those games or, like a comedy or theatre or music event that you want to go to. All you got to do is use the promo code that we're about to give you. Long-time listeners will know that it is TSS. So download the SeatGeek app today. Use the promo code TSS for $10 off your first purchase. TSS for $10 off your first purchase.
That is very true. Thank you very much to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode. To the midfield we go.
To the midfield. All right, quick recap. Stefan in goal. We've gone Cannon, Miazga and Long centre-back, Ream at left-back. Right? And we think that would be able to handle Canada's attack or give us the best chance of handling Canada's attack.
I think so.
Okay, to the midfield. The controlling midfielder, the number 6, it was Jackson Ewell against Cuba. Will Trapp didn't dress. We think it's going to be Michael Bradley.
We do.
Against Canada. We're certain it's going to be Michael Bradley?
I'm pretty confident. I think it will be Michael Bradley with Will Trapp dressing and probably Jackson Ewell not dressing.
Isn't that harsh after what Jackson Ewell putting in a really, really good performance? And in my opinion, cementing himself as at least the number 2 controlling midfielder.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's harsh in the sense that, he did a fine job against Cuba and continued to sort of raise his estimation, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But Michael Bradley is the starting number 6, I think, for the U.S. right now, especially under Berhalter. And really, I think if you're going to bring in Will Trapp as another midfield option, to not let him even dress for both games would be...
I mean, he was allowed to wear clothes, just not clothes that you can play in.
No, he was in a towel on the sideline. It was awkward. He was wearing different colored shorts. I did notice that.
Yeah.
But I think to not have him dress for either game would be harsh in a way that I doubt Greg Berhalter wants to be. So I'm going to guess we see Michael Bradley, Will Trapp on the bench, but I still think Jackson Ewell has probably moved his way ahead of Will Trapp.
I hope it's Ewell on the bench. Okay, but we're talking about this if it's definitely Michael Bradley, right?
Yes.
So what does Michael Bradley bring to that role? Because I'm not unhappy about this. I'm still in the camp that Michael Bradley can perform that controlling midfield role perfectly well for the short term. Right? I don't want a 40-year-old Michael Bradley doing it, but right now, I still think he's the best number 6 we've got.
Yeah, I mean, well, to answer your question, not in the way you wanted, but the way I'm prepared to answer right now. First of all, he's literally playing at home.
I've worked with you before. I know how this works.
This is his home field.
Yes.
Let us not forget playing
he knows
against
every inch of BMO field.
Playing against a teammate that I think is a key part of he's not necessarily going to be rattled by an away game. Not that any of these players would be.
He knows all Osorio's tricks.
Yeah. So I think it's that, but then I think it's also the veteran presence that Greg Berhalter likes. He's obviously talked about the line diagonals, which we saw Jackson Ewell be more than capable of hitting. I would still say this is where we go back to the yes, but it's Cuba, and could if you're coming under a little bit more pressure, can Jackson Ewell do those? If Canada's defense is a bit more organized or causes a few more problems, is Jackson Ewell as good at that? I wouldn't mind seeing the experimentation, but I have a lot of confidence that Michael Bradley can handle those sort of variations.
It's just occurred to me that the way we talked about Jackson Ewell and say Josh Sargent not making the Gold Cup roster, that Berhalter seems to integrate players very slowly. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that Jackson Ewell can just suddenly win this starting number 6 spot. And you might be right, that he doesn't even make the bench for this game. It's like it takes a while for you to learn the system, earn his trust, and get yourself a starting 11 spot. Unless you're Serginho Dest.
I also don't think that Greg Berhalter's ever going to say, here's my starting 11. Like, that's never a thing aside from kickoff. Like, that's never...
Hopefully at some point for each game.
But that's not going to be a thing I think we see from him. He's never going to say, like, yep, Michael Bradley is the number 6 until he's not. Like, I think it's always going to be little things that give him outs here and there when he needs them to be able to say, well, Jackson Ewell can do this and Michael Bradley can't, or Michael Bradley can do this and Jackson Ewell can't. Whether or not we agree with those justifications, I think that is...
Go to the barber is something Jackson Ewell can do.
Certainly.
Michael Bradley can't.
I mean, Michael Bradley has to get that hair shaved somehow.
I guess so, yeah. Go to the barber for a long time.
There we go.
All right, ahead of Michael Bradley.
It's always weird when you see the bald player, like the shaved bald player, up close, and you're like, oh, that's where the hair stops.
You can find the line.
You really can.
The line of confrontation.
Not mentioning any names at all, Brad Guzan. But anyway.
Here's what gets interesting.
Yeah.
So against Cuba, we saw in the 8 and the 10 role that play ahead of the controlling midfielder, we saw Christian Roldan at the 8, and we saw Weston McKenney at the 10. And Weston McKenney was lights out, the best player on the field.
He was.
Hat-trick, like, in 20 minutes. That beautiful assist to Jordan Morris, sort of, for the own goal. Like, constant threat. Weston McKenney in what essentially has been Christian Pulisic's position. And then Christian Pulisic out wide left.
Yeah.
So my question is, do we go with that same combination of Pulisic on the wing and McKenney in Pulisic's number 10 attacking midfield role spot? Or, against tougher opposition, do we revert back to Weston McKenney at the 8, Christian Pulisic at the 10?
Honest answer is I do not know. I really do not know. You could talk me into either one. I think part of my confusion is rooted in the idea that Paul Arriola took a big kick, apparently had like stud marks near both knees, like at the top of his leg, which means he got a lot of contact and maybe himself is dealing with some injury. So that was one element. And then Sebastian Lletget coming in and looking very not good. I'm not going to say he looked bad, but he did not look nearly as sharp as we've come to see.
His worst performance for the US, but it's up against quite a high bar because he's been really good.
Right. Yeah. I thought you meant against Cuba, and I was like, well, let's not say it's such a high bar.
Yeah.
So I think that is like Lletget less so than Arriola, because Arriola is actually maybe injured, whereas Lletget, it's just more of a like, well, he didn't look that good, so I'm not sure. But I say all that to say that like if Pulisic were going to be wide again, I do think it would be McKenney and then somebody else, maybe Roldan, but maybe Lletget, and that's where I'm like, but he didn't look that sharp. So does Berhalter want to stick with what kind of worked against Cuba?
And I think the tougher thing is, if I understand it correctly, the way that Berhalter sees things is originally like Pulisic as the main number 10 on that left side, with Lletget as the reserve number 10 on that left side, right, ahead of, say, Dwayne Holmes. Then McKenney as the first choice number 8, which is a slightly different role, right, because that number 8 is expected to drop back alongside the other midfielder in a 4-4-2 when we defend. The number 10 is expected to go alongside the striker, so it's a slightly more defensive role. McKenney with Roldan as his backup. So that's why I'm not convinced that it could be McKenney at left, attacking left centre mid, the number 10, and then Lletget as the number 8. Because I think he's not been designated in that role. So if McKenney is taken from the number 8 spot and put in the number 10 spot, it's going to be Christian Roldan starting against Canada.
And I'm not opposed to that. I'm really not.
Okay.
I have been vocal in my lack of enthusiasm about Christian Roldan in the starting 11. But I think given how strong the U.S. looked against Cuba, and it's worth noting how not potent they looked against Cuba in the second half. Obviously, part of that is that you're up 7-0. You can take the foot off a little bit, but there seemed to be a lack of ideas, a lack of sort of consistency of play that we saw in the first half once those 3 changes were made. And I think I'm going to go ahead and say, like, I would like to see Pulisic start wide again in this game, just because I want to see, like, does that give us a better attacking threat and is something that's been missing? Or do we see kind of the same problems once we go up against a stronger opponent? I guess I want the consistency in the 11 to be able to kind of let me know what was actually working versus what was working against Cuba.
Okay, so we're going to assume it's going to be Jordan Morris on the right. And we're going to assume that McKenney and Pulisic will feature somewhere, right? So then I guess the selection question is it Paul Arriola on the left wing, Pulisic number 10, McKenney number 8, or is it Pulisic out on the left wing, McKenney at the 10, and we assume Christian Roldan at the 8?
That would...
Those are the two variations on this, right?
I'm still confused why, like, I guess I understand, but like if you're going to say that McKenney would be the number 8 if Pulisic went to the number 10 spot, why couldn't you keep Pulisic at wide attack and put in Leggett as that number 10 and move McKenney to number 8 where he would go if you moved Pulisic central?
Oh, I didn't think about it. I thought you were saying Leggett would be the number 8.
No.
Okay. So Leggett in the 10 role and Pulisic out wide.
That's what I've always assumed. Yeah, that's because it would be like, and then Leggett can swap out wide and Pulisic can come central, similar to Pulisic and Areola.
Okay.
I think Leggett can do that type of work as well.
Is this if Areola's injured, or are you suggesting just selecting Leggett ahead of Areola?
Oh, no, that was just like, that was the one that would sort of make sense to me. Like, would be Pulisic wide, Leggett, McKenney, and then Morris on the other side. That's one I could see.
The reason I was confused is because my original idea was that McKenney looks so good in the 10 role that maybe there's a temptation to keep him there.
Right. Yeah. But I'm saying as long as we're moving him to number 8 to accommodate Pulisic, then why not move him to number 8 to see what happens when you bring Leggett in?
Okay.
That's a possibility as well. Again, like, you could really talk me into a lot of different ones of these. Maybe you'll end up having to make the final call here because, like, I could see a number of different possibilities based on whatever Berhalter wants to experiment. But I think actually, I'll just say it myself, because I want to see a little bit of consistency to know what's working. I think I want to see Pulisic wide. I really liked McKenney as that number 10, so maybe back to that, which means I think Rodin is a number 8.
It gives you the Pulisic-McKenney combo, which I actually think was quite important to just have those. It's a real strength on that side of the field, right, to have McKenney and Pulisic combining together.
I know what you mean, but it's confusing because the idea then of like saying like, yeah, but if you put Christian Pulisic out wide and McKenney at left, like left center midfield, you finally get that combination. It's like, well, wouldn't you get that if one is an 8 and one is a 10?
Not down one side. They're not focused down one side of the field, right? They can get split onto different sides of the field.
Gotcha. So what would you say?
It's Laria, right, is the right back. So that's who'd be in trouble if we went with that McKenney Pulisic thing. So there is a cautious part of me that thinks maybe go with what we've done the most, which is Pulisic at the 10, McKenney at the 8, the hard-working Paul Areola on the left wing, because then we know that he would track back as well. And then Jordan Morris on the right and Josh Sargent up front.
Okay.
That would be like the obvious pick and the thing that we've done lots and lots of times before, right? But then the other part of me is really tempted by this McKenney at the 10 and Pulisic out wide thing. So if you feel that way, I am 100% willing to go with you on that.
All right.
Yeah.
But then you've already moved ahead to Sargent starting up top. And that's where we may disagree, because while I would like to see Sargent start, I think we see Zardes. So that's what gets a little confusing as well.
The TSS pick would be Sargent, I assume, right? Unless you've had a massive about turn on your assessment of Jesse Zardes.
No, I think I would like to see Sargent, strangely, not even because he was good against Cuba, but because you and I saw a lot of things that we were like, okay, that's why he's not necessarily lighting the world on fire at Werder Bremen, and that's why we haven't seen him automatically be the number 9 for the U.S. under Berhalter. We had questions about his movement, about his positioning, about like the kind of threat he provides for the United States or he presents for Canada. And so maybe with a few more practices, a little bit more like repetition under his belt, maybe he looks a little bit better against Canada and we see more kind of dynamic running, which is a thing Berhalter talked about. I
saw a little bit of what I think Berhalter wants to see, which is Sargent coming deep and showing for the ball, or even fake showing for the ball, and then Jordan Morris running in behind him, right? I assume that's one of the patterns that Berhalter wants to see.
He also talked about Sargent like making direct runs into the box with the ball, and like that's not a thing I saw against Cuba.
Well, one thing I did see is he would crash the near post and defenders would go with him, and then it would like open up space at the back post that McKenney would come in and fill in. You know, a couple of those goals were like Jordan Morris, you could see he was almost aiming for Josh Sargent or aiming beyond Josh Sargent when he was making that near post crash. So I don't know. I think I saw enough from him that I'd be happy to see him start.
I mean, again, I'm literally saying Berhalter said like we want to see him go at people and like make runs into the box.
Yeah.
And like I guess as a decoy run to the near post, like that maybe, but that's not to me what, like, when you say, like, I want my number 9 making runs in the box and going at people, making a run to the near post to maybe be a decoy, but maybe be the one on the receiving end.
What did you take Berhalter to mean by that? Like, with the ball at his feet?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, we want to see him be a little bit more killer in front of goal. We want to see him try to take chances, and then...
So you want to see him, like, receive the ball with the centre-back in front of him and, like, go past the centre-back?
Yeah, and he didn't mention this, but I do believe that Berhalter probably didn't love that one sequence when Sargent works really hard, wins the ball, gets a breakaway, and skies that shot.
Right at the end.
Yeah, that level of, like, you...
I bet he liked the first 80% of it.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. But I really think that, like, if he finishes that one, I genuinely believe that he moves way higher up in Berhalter's estimations, just because it's like, not only can he win and do the off-the-ball running and cause problems and get the ball back and make a threatening attacking run, but he can calmly finish.
Yeah.
That "but he can calmly finish" is not a thing we've often said about a lot of the players on the national team. That's one thing I would love to be able to see from a U.S. striking option.
All right. And then if it's Zardes, I want to maybe get this out there.
Sure.
I definitely have more of an appreciation now for, even though he has some almost comedy moments in front of goal, the idea that Zardes is making the moves and being in the positions that Berhalter wants him to be in to open up space for other people. And I've come to see that striker role more as sometimes just you sacrificing your own goal-scoring glory or opportunities to open up space for other people. And because Zardes knows how to do that, that's why he keeps getting selected.
Yeah.
Right? And just if that happens and it's Zardes starting, I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, oh, Zardes, he's terrible, he sucks. Why are we even doing this? Because I think I have the answer for why are we even doing this? Why is he even playing? The answer is that he knows the patterns of play and can facilitate things for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1,000%.
So maybe if you're going to be supporting the US and just thinking about how does this team work and what is this guy's role within the team, think of it that way instead of just thinking of you don't like him, therefore you're going to be mad at the television.
Yeah.
Television can't hear you.
I would say this. It cannot. Number one, that is true. The television, well, unless it's a listening device for, any one of the governments or giant corporations around the world that is probably listening to everything you're watching, yes.
If it's, what's it called, Waystar, Rico?
Yes.
We hear you.
We hear you. Oh, boy. Oh, Gregory the Eggery. All right, here's what I'd say. Greg Berhalter is not stupid. And that is number one point I would like to get across. Is Greg Berhalter, you may not like him, you may not like his tactics, he is not a dumb human. And I can say that just because you don't get where he is by being stupid, but also how do I say this? The answers that he gave you and me when we asked technical questions were thought about and very quickly processed and answered in a way that did not involve a lot of boilerplate, easy language. I think he thinks about questions. I think he thinks about things in a way that right there shows that he's a smart person. And I think then that I say that to say I'm not going to be frustrated if it's Gyasi Zardes because I kind of assume that Greg Berhalter is working towards something and trying to make something happen, and Gyasi Zardes performs a role in there. Where my frustration comes in is, this is a long-winded way of explaining where I am sort of with Greg Berhalter, is that I think you and I have experienced at Richmond Kickers level, at club level with some of the teams we watch and or support in my case, that theory is only good if you can execute that theory, and idea and here's our principles. If you can't actually implement them, that's where my frustration comes in. I will never be frustrated with a coach who has interesting ideas and really focuses on pulling them off and effectively pulls them off. That's great. But if that coach has this idea of here's what Gyasi Zardes offers and here's why we got to keep calling him in, but then that never really becomes obvious how it's working or why it's working, that's where my frustration is. So I think that's another thing I'm going to be paying attention to, because again, I fully expect it to be Gyasi Zardes starting against Canada. So then I want to look at okay, is this just more of a let's just keep trying it and see? You want
to test my theory, is he creating space for other people that we're not really noticing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
this time we can watch and keep an eye on that and be that's it. Even though he maybe shanked one from 12 yards, he also opened up the space and McKenney ran into it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I want to see signs of okay, this isn't just on paper this should work, and so we're going to keep doing it and hope that it works. I want to see oh, Gyasi Zardes is making a run that we didn't see him make, or he is looking a little bit more clinical, or he's doing a job that other people can't do or he hasn't done previously. We're seeing the progression. If we don't see that, then my consternation with his continued selection increases.
Okay. Is there anything else we're looking for from this game? I'll give you one. I am looking for that Cannon-Morris connection. I want to see Morris making those fake runs one way, darting running behind him, Reggie Cannon being aware and quick enough to play him in. I know it was easier against Cuba, and we did it I don't know, it must have happened 10 times against Cuba, right? If it can happen 2 times against Canada, I feel that's still a pretty good ratio.
Yeah. I think with that in mind, my answer is I'm thinking about how I've thought about building this roster and building this starting 11 and this team. I don't necessarily care about the result, as ludicrous as that sounds. I always want to win. Don't get me wrong.
There are points on the line, and if we beat Canada in this game, we go top of this group because we've already matched their goal difference in terms of the goals they scored against Cuba.
First of all, listeners should know the size of my eye roll when you said there are points on the line.
There are.
I know what you're saying. I know we value things differently right now when it comes to the Nations League, and you are concerned about like where Canada would be in the hexagonal rankings and why they're going to care about it more.
Canada are concerned about where they're going to be in the FIFA World Rankings because they want to make the hex, not the second tier of World Cup qualifying.
And I don't
That's the thing they're absolutely thinking about.
And I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
But I think that when I look at like how I have thought about this starting 11 against Canada, it is very much with an eye towards, okay, where are we moving next? And that is, I think, what I want to see from this game is, okay, maybe it's Cannon, but maybe it's Yedlin. And if it's Yedlin, does he do the things that have been asked of him? Is he doing a different job? Or is he able to link up with Jordan Morris if it's Jordan Morris? If it's Christian Pulisic central, well, why are we playing him central? If it's him wide, then is that where he's going to be? Like, I guess I look at this Canada game as there are a lot of different like secondary question marks I have about this team that maybe this game could help answer at least several of them. And that's where I think I'm more focused on that than are we going to beat Canada?
And I think there's a lot of stuff like you asked Berhalter in the last press conference.
Again, I still want to win, don't get me wrong.
About Pulisic playing central versus Pulisic playing wide. And Berhalter's answer was essentially, we still don't know what's best. We're still finding things out about him. I don't mind it being a different position for a different game, honestly. I don't mind sometimes Pulisic in the middle, sometimes Pulisic out wide. I think it's kind of the endless question, right? Is Pulisic better central or wide? Maybe it just depends who we're playing. You know what I mean? I'm happy with him moving back and forth.
Yeah. It's not as though I need him to be in one role all the time.
Yeah.
It's more of a, like, we talk about this national team a lot.
Very well. I never get tired of it.
That question of the number 8 versus number 10 and who's there if it's not Pulisic, I genuinely don't have an answer. Like, I don't have an answer that I would say confidently. Because, like, it's Rodin as an 8 if it's Weston McKenney as a 10. Is that a thing I want to see against stronger opposition? No. So then, like, who else fills that role? Like, I think there are certain question marks I have about this team that are deeper, less answerable questions, for me at least, than I have had in a long time.
Okay. Final thing. I know we're almost out of time, right? Because you've got to get out of here. Final thing we're thinking about is there will be, unlike against Cuba, there will be moments when Canada have the ball and they're bringing it.
Cuba had the ball a lot. It was just when they were kicking off after the U.S. scored.
Right, yeah. They had a lot of possession in the centre circle, right in the middle of the field. So
at least 7 completed passes.
There'll be a lot of times when Canada will have the ball. I'm very interested in, once again, seeing how our 4-4-2 defensive setup, how it works and how we're able to block off their passing options or apply pressure, because I am still not convinced by this. Sometimes the wingers go in pressure, but they do it late, and it's a little... it's always a second too late to be actual pressure. I saw that not working a lot in previous games. And I want to see it work against Canada. I don't see Berhalter changing that system. I would like to see it at least get refined to the point where it's effective in stopping Canada from playing.
One final wrinkle with everything you've mentioned there, I should note... We hear this sometimes, and sometimes it's like an easy answer. It's not necessarily the truth, but 4 or 5 different players that I heard speak on Friday evening straight up said, without much prompting, like, we have not prepared for Canada yet. We have only prepared for Cuba. That's what we've been focused on. And I do wonder if that is true. Like, do we see them go back to kind of a more familiar setup and system because
so
they haven't worked it as much?
Central, Areola wide left, Morris wide right.
But again,
I wouldn't be mad about it. It's still a fine setup.
But that would be dictated by how much of the ball Canada have and what they think Canada are going to do.
Okay, actually that raises a second question. Maybe we can address this later if you're about to run out of time. The idea of, does Greg Berhalter take into account the opposition are strong here? We've got to watch out for this guy. We've got to do this or we've got to do that. Or does Greg Berhalter just constantly, because time is limited as well, constantly repeat the positional play, patterns of play, run these options? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is all the focus just on what we do with the ball? And that's why the defensive side of it looks a little weak. And maybe we're not set up to be prepared for the specific threat of Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David.
I don't have an answer for you, my friend.
That might be a question we have after this game if things go wrong. But let's hope that things go right.
My operational assumption has always been that you want the most generically applicable, successful formation and approach you can have that you can then adjust little things here and there to be like, Alphonso Davies is a very pacey left winger that we know is going to do this. If all their attacks are going to go down that side, then we just want to adjust a little bit, and now we've got a more defensive right winger who can come in and handle that. That's my assumption.
But that wouldn't be Jordan Morris, right?
It would not. So there you go. So that's the question then, is that a thing that Berhalter's doing, is adjusting his general game plan with little modifications, or is it not adjusting at all, or is it a complete adjustment?
Okay, here's a good acid test. If we end up seeing Jordan Morris on the left wing and we see Christian Roldan on the right wing doing a more defensive job, we'll know that he has taken into account Alphonso Davies, let's shut that down.
All right.
Yeah, all right, so that'll be a thing to look out for as
Lots of things to look out for from this game.
Yes, I will have both my eyes on this game. I'm going to be in Boston, but we're still going to record a review after the game, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, we will.
It's Canada versus the United States.
It will not be in a car.
It's listed as a 7:30 Eastern kickoff. It's on ESPN2 and on TUDN.
So 8:07 is what we're thinking?
I don't know. I don't know if we'll find out, right? I'm going to tune in around 7:30.
Richmond area code is when it's going to kick off.
See what's going on. All right, Tyler Rockwell, thank you for previewing this game with me.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening to us preview this game, and we will talk to you again late Tuesday night.